Welcome to another episode of Not Investment Advice. We've got an NIA boys here, Trung Phan, me, Master Flex himself, and Jack Butcher, founder of Visualize Value, and I'm Bilal Zaidi as always. Boys, we got lots going on. We're going to be talking about Tiffany, our luxury fashion friends. We're going to be talking about them working on CryptoPunk pendants that they're selling for 50 G's a pop, even more than that, I think. I don't know the full details. Jack's going to break it down and explain the significance of that in the world of luxury and what this might mean for the future of luxury. Trung's going to be talking about LVMH, the parent company, and why they've been kind of like an evergreen luxury brand for a long, long time. And we're going to break down luxury marketing as well. But boys, there's only one place to start. We've got to do a quick one because I know people have been asking us about it. If you've been following since the Saylor episode, which was, I think, 3 weeks ago now, we've just set off a whole media cycle, boys. What's going on? Vitalik's coming swinging on Twitter. Yahoo Finance covering and sharing NIA's interview with Saylor. What has been going on, boys? It's been a lot of drama.
Well, for the uninitiated, the Vitalik Buterin tweet, founder or creator of Ethereum, was, "Why do Bitcoin maxis keep finding total clowns as heroes?" referring to Michael Saylor. And the clip he was referring to was when Saylor more or less said that any non-Bitcoin crypto digital currency was basically an SEC violation and people should be going to jail for it. And then this was the running joke. They rooted in the Ten Commandments law. Like he goes, when Bilal Zaidi said, well,
Don't open up a can of worms, he said. Yeah.
No, they go, Bilal asked Michael, sometimes, Michael, the technology gets ahead of the law. And then, isn't this an example of technology, like Ethereum, digital currencies getting ahead of the law? And Michael Saylor hit back at Bilal and said, no, Bilal. These laws, securities laws, are rooted in the Ten Commandments.
It's biblical. I love that the clip that someone cut said it was like Ethereum and the Bible, or like crypto and the Bible, or something like that. It was... Anyway, we don't want to overtake the whole conversation about Saylor, but yeah, I know a few people have been messaging us and asking about that. So boys, let's get straight into it this week. Jack, I know you're our marketing guy. I know we all do kind of parts of marketing, but you worked with a lot of these brands, and you've obviously been our kind of resident NFT guy. So what happened this week with Tiffany and CryptoPunks, and why was it significant?
Let me pull up a screen share here, boys, but I'll walk through for the listeners. So I think it was yesterday, Tiffany announced... Can you see that?
Not yet. And for people who are still... Oh, there we go.
There you go, right. So yesterday... Is this yesterday? Yeah, 31st of August, Tiffany announced that they're going to create one-of-one pendants representing... CryptoPunk NFTs. So there's an image here. If you can't see it, it's in the classic Tiffany box, and there's a tiled pendant of a CryptoPunk. So the idea being that this will be sold exclusively to people who hold CryptoPunks, and then they'll have the ability to redeem the NFT for a physical pendant that represents the punk that they own. And there's been, like, as you can imagine, there's been reaction on Twitter where people are like, $50,000 for this thing, that's obscene, et cetera, Probably not much overlap between the people commenting on it and the people that are, lining up to buy the thing. Because I imagine this will completely... they're only making 250 of them, so I imagine they'll be gone in the first few seconds. But anyway, we were just talking about, before we got on, some of the initial theses shared by early adopters of punks specifically was this is a new status symbol of sorts, right? So the same way people buy watches, fashion, align themselves with any fashion brand or buy any product that is considered fashionable. This is the digital equivalent of that, and this is a top tier brand acknowledging that or proving that thesis correct. I think is it Alexandre Arnault? Is he run Tiffany?
He's VP of Tiffany. He was formerly the CEO of Arnault. He's a son of Bernard Arnault, but he has been spearheading a lot of these crazy initiatives Do you guys remember some of the other ones they did?
Yeah, and
with Jay-Z and Beyonce.
Yeah, the painting, right? The Basquiat.
Yeah, exactly.
Correct. Yeah. So I think there's been they've been issuing subtle hints for a while. I think a lot of them changed their. A few of the Arnault kids had punk profile pictures for the last few months, maybe even a year. So I think the same thesis that is like pervasive in the NFT space is like CryptoPunks, like the original, the original status symbol profile picture represents like really early adopters of the space. And I think honestly, like reproducing this in this format is the most, it's the most naturally aligned with a brand like this from my perspective. Like it's not incredibly complicated to reproduce either. It's not like these hand-drawn images that you see in a lot of other NFT collections. So I imagine this idea has been around a long time. I think Arnault made himself one maybe 6 months ago or something, and that's probably similar to what we've talked about before, where you put this piece of you put this idea out on the internet to try and validate demand for it, and obviously that blew up among the punk community. And I think a few people reached out to get quotes to have them done custom, and I think they were like incredibly astronomical. I'm sure you can get Tiffany to make something one-off for you, but I'm sure it'll be extremely expensive. So they're running 250 of them, and I think they're also gonna pre-select 100. I imagine they're doing this for like amplification purposes, where they'll, people who have profiles and reputation in the space, they're going to make sure that 100 people that can amplify it are the right people to give it to. So there's going to be 150 on the free market, and I don't think.
Well, Jack, to your point,
sorry, Jack, just one sec. Jack, could you just unshare the screen, because I can't do it from my side. Yeah, there you go.
Let me just do it and not.
Sorry, go on,
meeting there, yeah.
No, let's tell listeners we're trying Riverside this week, so some potential difficulties. No, but we're good. We're here. But Jack, let me ask two questions, and then I have a number of comments related to Bernard Arnault, who is the second richest man in the world, LVMH guy. And the reason why I think it's interesting is he had two quotes about his philosophy of luxury, which I think you guys will love. So the first question I had was, will you be getting one?
Yeah, I might try. I don't know. We'll see. It's a little...
But I mean, hold on a second. Hold on. Wait, Jack.
Aggressive, yeah.
Celia,
aggressive.
Are you listening at this part? We might ask you to turn off the listening. But Jack, could you, if you were to buy it, would it be a thinking of like, hey, I'm going to own this punk and I'm going to own the NFT pendant from Tiffany, and then those things combine? That combined value, when you end up deciding to sell in the future, it's going to be astronomical.
Yeah, I guess that would be the thesis. I don't see much, like, this is going to sound mad, I think, to a lot of people listening to this, but there's one of them that I will never, ever sell. So, like, that's that would be the one that I would opt to have turned into a physical object. And I think that's true of a lot of people. I don't know... We've talked about this like way back, where people built brands around these images. Like the avatar really represents a character that you've come to like know. And I think that there's something odd about that, right? It's like putting all this equity into this image and then like selling it. It's very similar to like... I don't know, growing a brand and then selling it. It's something that is, you don't necessarily aim to do from the offset. So I don't know if there's going to be that much secondary activity on this. I think a lot of it's going to be like, I want it because it represents a really significant moment in history. It's like crossing the chasm, right? This like nerdy, digital, like thing that doesn't really get recognition outside of the space, being acknowledged in such a significant way by like maybe one of the most recognizable brands in the world, right? Tiffany, that box, even that color,
Tiffany
like
blue.
you see that color without the box or the
Kinda
logo
like
or
this.
the word, you know it. And that's, Yeah, and I think that's like probably more significant to people in the community than people outside, right? Where people have held this thesis and like just had this feeling in their gut that these things are like valuable, and this acknowledgement is proving their thesis in many ways. So I don't think a lot of them will move on, but you're probably right. Like there are people that use that thesis to like build a portfolio that is valuable that they can one day.
There are 10,000 punks, right? There's 10,000 punks, so
we'll
only
see.
250, and like you said, only
10,000.
150 will be up. So what is that? 10?
Yeah, they haven't released all the details on the sale, so I believe they're like Ethereum NFTs, because the other thing they'll have to do is like gate the sale to people who hold a punk in their wallet, and I don't know whether they'll do that or not. And if they don't do that, then that's going to be like inherently, like insanely complicated on the back end. But we'll see. I think it's happening in 3 or 4 days, so we can do maybe a 5-minute recap on the next episode. My theory is they'll figure out a way to just get it in the hands of the people that
on Alexandre
will commit to building the
Arnault's
thing.
Twitter following. He follows 350 people. So yesterday, I'm just looking at who he follows. He follows
Research as in you were snooping. It sounds like.
I was snooping. He follows Kevin Rose, or is that the guy who does the who's the dig guy? Kevin Rose.
Kevin Rose.
Yeah,
Kevin
so
Rose,
I think Kevin Rose is gonna get one. He also got a retweet from Alexandre. Cosmo de Medici is followed by Alexandre Arnault. So I think to your point, Jack, I think if you want to find the 100 people that are probably gonna get it, you take a quick look at who's following on Twitter, right? A lot of CryptoPunk avatars. 2 quotes from Bernard Arnault that I would love for you guys to noodle on. So LVMH, Louis Vuitton, Moet Hennessy is a $350 billion holding fashion and luxury holding company. Bernard Arnault and his family own, I believe, 51% of the company. Anyway, he's the second richest person in the world right now. So behind.
What are some of the brands? Because I think a lot of people have heard of Louis Vuitton and they just think of, I know you just mentioned a few others, but Louis Vuitton is like just one brand within LVMH. But they're like the big luxury group.
Louis Vuitton is it's in the name, but it's also Louis Vuitton itself is the most valuable luxury brand in the world. So of the 350 billion market cap of LVMH, Louis Vuitton's worth about 50 billion.
That's crazy.
And I just pulled up a few just so people know. There's like Christian Dior, Fendi, Givenchy, Marc Jacobs, Stella McCartney, etc. There's like Sephora. There's so many. Tagger.
Well, you want to break it down.
Brand.
Break it down into verticals. That's a great call out, Bilal. So let's call it like some of the names you mentioned. Fashion is Louis Vuitton, Celine, Fendi. Wine and spirits, which is the Moet Hennessy part, is Hennessy, Moet, Belvedere, and Krug. And then we're talking about Alexandre Arnault trying to modernize the brand. He's the one that did the deal with Jay-Z.
Jay-Z has a CryptoPunk too, boys. That was we talked about that way back, so maybe he'll be getting one.
Yeah.
All coming together. It's all coming together.
Bilal's like the guy at the end of Usual Suspects.
Jack Dorsey's there in the back with his boy.
Perfumes, they have Dior, Guerlain, watches and jewelry. So what we're discussing now is Tiffany's, Hublot, and Tag Heuer, and then retail is Sephora. So for all the male listeners, know there's a lot, is when your missus goes to Sephora. You mean
the 97.8% of male listeners we have?
Yeah. When you're exactly right. When your missus is going to a Sephora to buy some makeup that is owned by LVMH. Actually, I'll tell you one thing interesting about Tag Heuer, the watch brand, run by one of Alexandre Arnault's brothers, and they also tried to get into NFTs. So with all that preamble, let me throw you guys the 2 quotes that Bernard Arnault, who's the patriarch of this empire, what he said. He said that he says that the entire purpose of his brand building is to find stars. He wants star brands. And what he means by that is a brand that can last 100 years. So that obviously has very big implications for when it comes to the partnership with CryptoPunk, right? And then the other thing he says is, this is a very famous quote. He says, there are 2 aspects about LVMH and luxury that sound contradictory. LVMH brands are timeless, but they're also the utmost level of modernity. So let me throw those to you guys. Think about that. So the star.
That's a bar, son. That last one was good. Damn.
Dude, so why don't...
Could you say that last one again? Because I just want to noodle on it. The last one was very good.
Yeah, noodle on it. Bernard Arnault, who I'm probably pronouncing his name wrong. And for the listeners, we have a group chat, and we call him Geezer. Group chat. The LVMH brands have two aspects, which may sound contradictory. They are timeless, but also the utmost level of modernity. All right, so there's that quote, and that they only want star brands, which is why actually the Tiffany acquisition is so interesting. Tiffany is the most expensive acquisition LVMH has ever made. It closed in 2019 after half a decade of negotiations, a lot of lawsuits actually. But the thing about that is there's only so many brands you can buy at that level, right? And you had to drop 16, 17 billion to make that happen. So let's start with the star one. What do you guys think about the statement, we only want star brands, or the entire purpose of LVMH is to acquire star brands?
Well, I mean, they've done it.
Jack,
I kind of
thoughts,
view
mate?
both the quotes together, or like I'm thinking about how the two relate to one another. And I think that's what a star brand is, right? It's like it has the staying power, but it also can like update itself constantly and remain relevant. I think those are the two characteristics that make something a lasting, like relevant for a lasting period of time. And you know, to go back to the beating drum that we do on NIA every week, is like these things are like super memes, these brands, like the LV pattern, the Tiffany blue, like these. I think that like every brand within their portfolio probably has like, there's like a power law within it where they just nailed one or two things that just became these cultural phenomenons that carry them into the future. Yeah, pretty fascinating. Like what was the Off-White relationship with LVMH? Virgil was the creative director of Louis Vuitton, right? And they acquired a piece of Off-White in that deal.
Yeah, the men's line,
is that correct?
Before he passed away. And
that's a star brand, right? That's a good example of like I think Off-White in 100 years will still be like it is indicative of like a style and a taste and a moment in time, but it has an aesthetic that is malleable enough to stay relevant, and it has like devices within it, like the quotation marks. You see those now, you're like, that's Off-White. But the style of the time and the things that are going on in culture, you can take that like incredibly like recognizable device and update it and like put it in new contexts and put it in different places, and it's like it has this like cultural weight that carries it into the future, and it has an incredible story and incredible talent that worked on it and made it what it is. I don't know that much about the more traditional brands like the Louis Vuitton luggage. If you've ever seen like pictures, like 150-year-old pictures of the Louis Vuitton luggage stacked up, and they're basically still producing the same SKUs as they did 100 years ago. They're like Lindy brands, Lindy symbols. I would say like maybe Nike and Apple on like the more like premium, like not ultra luxury consumers have done a very similar thing where like they have symbols that are kind of just hit escape velocity, and they can just use them in so many different ways, and it's hard to erode their lead, especially if it's kind of what's the word I'm looking for? It's kind of like football clubs, right? Where if you have a brand, you always attract incredible talent. It's like in all of the European football leagues, like the same 3 or 4 teams like have these like 20, 30, 40 year reigns because they're like in the consciousness of people, and all the top players want to play there. In the same way, a fashion brand, all the top designers want to go and work at LVMH or an LVMH portfolio company. I think it's similar to what we've talked about even in technology. Like if Facebook gets less cutting edge or perceived as like a platform that isn't doing like cool things, you can't retain the talent to keep it where you want to keep it. So I think like all of these companies play similar games. It's about like the weight they hold in culture.
Jack, just to add to what you said, the Off-White one is a really interesting example because, you know, back to Trunk's quote, but I can't remember exactly, but it was like classic and modern is kind of the two things I heard there, which was we want things that are forever, right? Like diamonds are forever, Tiffany, like you think of their jewelry is made, like if you've got an antique Tiffany from back in the day, it's still going to be a classic thing that people want today. But the modern part is interesting because to me, Off-White is a really unique one without knowing all the details of their full portfolio, because streetwear, which is kind of where it started with anyway, but nowadays everything is basically streetwear, was seen for a long time, especially in these circles, as too modern and too, like, you know, not luxury at all. And it's been an interesting shift where people like Virgil and Kanye to a certain extent and Pharrell to a lesser extent, but kind of in that world as well, that became the call, where it became so prominent across the world that they needed to incorporate that as the new part. And it's interesting if you think from a business point of view, how do you get the new stuff? You kind of need to acquire, right? Like, because the Off-White one is a perfect example. You need to get the talent, but you can't just get that one person. You need the ethos of what they're building, because it takes a lot more than one person. So I also think, like, you know, it's a great marketing, you know, speak, you know, when you say we all love things that are classic and modern, right? Like on a much smaller scale, the NIA brand, just since we all work on it, is very much the same thing. It's based on classic nostalgia, right? Like our podcast logo is a joke, but it's also, the word art is going to be a classic thing for a long time as well. But the whole premise of the show is we're talking about all the new stuff happening in the world. So I'm not trying to convert Yeah. Monetization.
Alexandre,
there we
go. Once Jack buys that NFT Tiffany pendant, we're gonna get him on. But hold on, I'm gonna tell you guys a quote that I think you will both appreciate after Bilal talking regarding Virgil and how he's kind of streetwear a little bit more modern. So this is what Bernard Arnault says about a lot of young designers he works with. So other than Ablo, he's worked with Rihanna and Stella McCartney when she was coming up. He says that when you run a fashion house, you're looking at the future, not the past. To attract new clients, you have to take risks. Designers, like painters, are more creative in their 30s. So they're courting young designers in their 20s and 30s because they're just like, this is where the future comes from. But it is so interesting. I think Bilal, he said, it's like, when you say something with a legacy and the future, it's kind of cheating in the way
it's the
like,
best of both worlds. It's like,
you're covering the entire history of mankind. It's like, I got one more quote that I'd love to add. I'd love for both of you guys to talk about, actually, because I think this has a lot to say about Bernard Arnault's position in the top 10 richest people list. So I'll just go through the list right now. It's Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Adani from India conglomerate, Arnault's number 2, and then you have Ballmer, Gates, Ellison, Page, Brin. Like tech, Indian conglomerate, and then fashion geezer, right?
Yeah, it used to be like Carlos Slim was the only other guy in there, right? Like, that's crazy.
But check out this quote that Arnault gave to the New York Times in 1998. When you cannot differentiate yourself from others with money, then you must differentiate yourself with something that indicates you know how to recognize the best. So I think there's something incredibly profound in that statement.
My question is, how well set up are these companies to actually win in this new world? And so like this is just one kind of, you know, touch point along a long journey of them trying to figure it out, and a partnership or whatever of, you know, one of the hottest brands in this new technology world that we talk about every week. But, you know, if you think about like that tension between the old and new, I think I've worked with a couple of their, I've worked with Hublot with the C-level there. I worked with Saint Laurent in my old job with the C-level. Well, Saint Laurent's the other big luxury house, but they're like very much similar sort of people. and they are the most careful with every single thing that you do with them, right? Like, so literally the font that your press release is going out on, I think we just lost Trunk, but we'll keep going until he comes back. But yeah, you know this, Jack, I'm talking to the right person here. Like, literally the font, the weight on the font, no shadows, making sure you don't put a picture near the logo. Like, there's all these kind of rules you get when you work with them, and so that is kind of like the high standards they have in their world. And I think, like, if you compare that, and that you can't really work in that world if you're wanting something new every single day, I think, because you kind of need to sit in the classic and old. Whereas like the new stuff, I'm curious like how they bridge that gap, if that makes sense, because in this world it's like there's a lot of ugly stuff, right? And like they need to be very selective of like the stuff they want to work on versus just like opening up to a bunch of people to remix the way that we do in this space.
Yeah. As you were talking, I was thinking about the way a lot of these brands and products propagate now. Is like we've talked about, I know we know Trunk's feelings on this, but TikTok and like the celebrity exponent. So like I think what it's done over time is like expose a different level of lifestyle to more people, right? Like everybody sees how the Kardashians live, and I think what that does over time is like everybody tries to emulate that level of lifestyle to the degree they can, and that it's almost like the best brands don't have to do marketing in that sense. I think that's like a controversial statement because, you know, marketing is like really hard to define. Like if you invest a incredible amount of money in product and partnerships, and like they obviously create content and put it out into the world, but like fashion is like such a I don't know, such a powerful vehicle for like product, right? Like especially like stuff that people wear. So like you'll see, I think this has happened before, like you'll see a photo of a celebrity wearing like some random thing, and then 40 minutes later you can't get it anywhere because the way that stuff spreads around the world now. And I think like these luxury brands just have distribution like baked into people that are like, there's like this engine of distribution built in just as a function of their like 200-year legacy, right? Like they do these very specific marketing tactics, but there's also like the flywheel just is much easier to spin because the people that already fans of the brand or already wear the brand are recording themselves wherever they go and putting out content all the time. So I think there's some interesting, like, to break into that category is much more difficult than to keep your lead, obviously.
Wait, Jack, so to your point, if you look at a lot of LVMH's brands, look how far back some of these brands go. Here are all the brands that go back at least 100 years. Bulgari, who started 1884, Berluti, 1895, Tag Heuer, 1860, Louis Vuitton was 1854, Hennessy, 1765. And these guys have a champagne that goes back to 1365, like a French champagne. It's like exactly to your point, right? Le Clos de Lambray, I'm destroying it, but 1365. Well, this is...
But they have Moet.
Yeah, Moet. Hennessy,
Moet
1765.
Too, right?
I don't know when Moet was.
But this, like, that's another good example. Like Hennessy, I think, is a kind of a fascinating one. It's like the most consumed media in pop culture. Like there's references to these brands, like music. They talk about cars, fashion, alcohol. Like this, there's like
Henny is the
tier.
rapper's choice, right? Like I heard Stormzy,
Lamborghinis.
the British rapper Stormzy, he has a whole song where he references Henny, and he said he'd never even tried it before or something like that. And that's how much it has star power. And I mean, we talk about hip hop on here quite a lot, but like Kanye West used to call himself Khan the Louis Vuitton Don. Like that was his aspirational thing.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it is an interesting thing where you think like how these guys have been able to keep that, there's been that staying power for so long. But yeah, I mean, Jack, I'm curious because this kind of brings us on to like the luxury marketing part we had in mind as well. Like how do they manage to keep themselves relevant at that level? Is it just literally just getting the best talent and saying we started in 1776 and, you know, keeping the high quality stuff going?
You know what's funny? I think most people don't care about the age of them. Like, wouldn't buy it because it's old. But like, it's the story has just got so much weight because it's old. I think. Like, I've worked in luxury automotive, and there's brands in that space that used to just sell cars so they could keep competing in F1. So like, just to fund their racing team. Which is what, like, it's an actual story, right? It's not like, hey, let's start a car company.
Is this Ferrari you're talking about?
Yeah. And I think a lot of the early competitors, Lamborghini's got an amazing story too. The dude used to make tractors or something, and like there was a rivalry between Lamborghini and Ferrari, and they never really succeeded in the racing world. But anyway, another topic for another day. But the idea that like so many of these brands have like real, legitimate, incredible legacies and stories. I think people underestimate that. And even if you don't know why this thing is significant, it just became significant enough that you don't even need to tell the story, right? All of that meaning gets absorbed by this symbol, and it gets referenced by people who have the biggest voices in culture. And there was a point in time where I think there's probably been a bunch of like lawsuits and like brands trying to prevent their name being used in certain contexts. But I think that's becoming less and less common now. Like, you know, trying to control who buys cars, even secondhand for some of these brands. Like, there's like really incredible levels of control that go into the inventory. Like, you won't get offered car X unless you've been a customer for 10 years and you bought these other 3 or 4 cars.
It's just,
but now I don't.
It's exclusivity. It's kind of like what I'm hearing, right? It sounds a bit of it. Exclusivity, limited runs, like, but like, because you were saying this before we started recording, that how these brands are almost like recession proof because there's always people who want to signal and buy the most expensive stuff, and often actually in recessions a lot of rich people actually get richer sometimes as well, so there's even more reason.
I think
to do
most
it.
of the time, right, especially now, like I think we've talked about the idea of like just technology erodes the middle, and like there's just this increasing concentration of wealth at the top end, and then when it gets really difficult to it's crass to go around and talk about how much money you've got, but you just buy a yacht that's 100 foot longer, right? Like, there's all these ways that people flex their wealth.
The have-nots and the have-yachts. Is that what you said the other day?
That's an Andrew Tate quote, by the way.
There we go.
The most controversial man on the internet, but you got to drop a reference.
Yeah, the most famous man on the internet right now, for sure.
I think it's interesting that, like, to the degree which brands try and control the image, and I think like what it's really about is like how good their product and story has been for a long time. Because if you buy this stuff, like, it is legitimately superior. Like, the quality of it is incredible, and it took I think to maintain that level of quality is a really hard thing to do over a really long period of time, because it's very easy to like take a shortcut for more money in the short term. Like, there's brands that I saw that were born 10 years ago that were really, really like were really on an amazing trajectory. And then you see like what they're putting out now, and it's clearly like, you know, probably got bought by some private equity firm. You like want to You know, it's got the same logo stitched on it, but they've compromised on the quality of the product because, you know, the brand is...
Because it becomes an equation versus
exactly. There's not the poetic quote from the leader like the Bernard Arnault that Trung led with. It's just like, how do we squeeze as many dollars out of the shit as we possibly can in the shortest amount of time? And it's a short-term game, which, as we've referenced a million times, is a dumb way to try and make money. But as soon as
it's like when Costco put their hot dog price up, they didn't stay true to the values. I can't think of two things on two ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same principle.
The LVMH and the Costco hot dog. It's the same principle. Yeah. They stuck to their guns.
Like, as soon as you start compromising on that stuff, I think it's really hard to measure. It's like pretty intangible, right? It's like people just know not intrinsically. Like there's some like. You know when a brand is cutting corners, or you know when the quality of a thing is reducing over time. And I'm not saying that that's avoidable in every situation, but it's like you have to have an amazing story, and you have to have people that are unwilling to compromise on the journey too.
Do either of you know who actually buys these brands? On obviously it's completely different by brand, but I'm saying, let's say clothing. Let's say high, like you said there, $1,000 t-shirt or $500 t-shirt. Because I've read, I mean, I actually did my dissertation on this, but not luxury. It was like fashion. It was just in the 2000s, right? So like a lot has changed since then, I'm sure. But I'm curious to see if you. I'm sure one of you.
Change. It's timeless. It has not changed.
I'm playing dumb. No, but no. What I was curious about is like. Have either of you read or heard about who actually buys a lot of this stuff? Because my understanding was actually like, yeah, there's super rich people who might buy some of this stuff, but the huge segment of their customer base are just people who really can't essentially afford 100%. To buy it, and they're kind of, it's the aspirational kind of buy.
Well, dude, let me hit you with a couple of excerpts from this book I mentioned in our chat. So for the listeners, there's a book called The Luxury Strategy. It's written by two luxury say in the lead to this book that luxury isn't the key to luxury is you don't create envy, you create dreams. You like you said, it's aspirational, right? So and like Hermes is probably the best example here. What's interesting about all the luxury brands that we've talked about, and let's talk about even so Hermes sells the Birkin bag, which is a $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 handbag. Handmade, and we'll talk a little bit actually about what makes it so special. But what Hermes also does, and Bilal, you probably know this, Jack, you probably know this when you travel with the missus, they sell much smaller items to get people into the ecosystem, right? My wife always hit me up. Yeah, hey, can we get the scarf? Can we buy the scarf?
Get them in the funnel. Get them in the funnel. That's it. It's Jack's $1 visualized value course. That's it. Get a little taster.
Yeah, no, get them in the ecosystem, right? Every luxury brand, and Jack talked about it with Tiffany actually. Tiffany will sell you an $80 like a wrist thing, but they'll also make you a custom. I said he's got this video he's interviewed. He says the luxury brands, he wants them to $1 million piece of jewelry. So they want, and Alexandre Arnault and at Oxford Union to be accessible. And this is the key quote that I think you guys will really enjoy, and I'd love to noodle on this. From the book, The Luxury Strategy, they said the key tenet of luxury marketing is this. You want the ratio of the amount of people that know about a brand to be massive versus the amount of people that can afford it. They're like, that's the ratio that drives the industry. So I think, Jack, you kind of mentioned a lot of this. Is like,
yeah.
Like, you want to be super well known, right? And you obviously want to gate it, but you still want some accessibility so people can keep dreaming they can acquire.
Yeah, like look, any luxury car brand is a good example of this, right? People watch F1 on Sunday, and like kids put a poster up in your bedroom wall. They'll do like a Puma trainer or like some like polo shirt that you can buy in a sports shop. But then the cars start at $300,000, and it's like the idea that story captures someone when they're younger, and then the people that do go on to have like obscene amounts of success call back to that moment in time where they were like, oh, I really loved car manufacturer X, and the story, like the romance of that carries through. And I think you have to have the right like amount of belief and commitment to the story and everything you do, because when you start to lose that, like that it trickles into the people that want to be associated with it, the people that want to wear it, the people that want to drive around in it. I do think there is like a escape velocity at a certain point, though, where like certain brands, they just feel like they can almost do no wrong. There's so much of a meme behind them. I do think in fashion there's been a few examples, and maybe I don't know enough about fashion, but like the maybe top, like the higher tier premium brands that can really like overcook how accessible they make stuff, and then that kind of reduces the appeal at the top end.
Devalues the brand.
Yeah,
well,
and I think
the
a lot
other
of the
thing is
high-end
like
brands,
discounting as well. So go ahead.
No, I was going to say a lot of the high-end brands like make their margin on like perfume, stuff like that. Like they're making losses on some of the products they ship. Like their runway stuff is like incredibly difficult to make,
right?
incredibly expensive to buy, but they don't make any money on it. But then they'll sell like a $2 bottle of perfume for $130.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Well, I think it's perfume and yeah, exactly. You're subsidizing the like high end of the business, and the like. I think that's pretty amazing. Like that's this is not maybe that's what the great brands have in common. Like they built a business to subsidize doing the thing that they really love to do. And like if you see some of these runway shows, like the care, the love, the thought, the time that goes into every single detail, like architecting the space, making the clothes. Well, this is not like a private equity rinse and like try and squeeze cash out of this thing deal. And like there's something really inspiring about that, like regardless of what it is you do, because there's maybe this idea of like something that isn't commercially viable by itself is indicative of like a love for the thing beyond making money. Does that make sense? Yeah. You've had to build a business to support this thing that you really love to do that wouldn't be economically viable by itself. And to make it economically viable would be to compromise on the quality of the thing.
I think Kanye West said it, Jack. It ain't Ralph Tho, if you remember that classic interview, which was where Sway was saying, why don't you just print your own t-shirts, whatever, and he was like, it ain't Ralph Tho, because he went mental on him, because he was like, the quality, the stitching, the processes, Ralph Lauren, referencing Ralph Lauren,
Well, there's a great, there's this, Kanye spoke at Cannes, like, with Ben Horowitz and Steve Stout, like,
what a combo, by the way.
6 years ago. So it's a great
panel.
talk. Like, you have to look at it. But he talks about like partnering with like Adidas, Gap, get like these people that have taste and ideas that need to plug into infrastructure to get them out to the world. Like if your brand is big enough, like Kanye West could do a collaboration with, Tide Pods at this point, and like you wouldn't be able to get them. That's just endless possibilities. I don't think that's been true in history before.
New smells, different smell drops.
Right. Yeezy Pods. I will buy them.
You guys, I kind of want. Would you guys be open to me tying this all together with the Hermes bag? Because I think the Birkin
go on.
bag,
Let's hear it.
Everything Jack is talking about, Bilal, you've mentioned is what is actually luxury? Like what makes it special? And I think the Birkin bag is such an interesting case study. Here's another quote you guys will love. So Axel Dumas is the CEO of Hermes. This is his quote. He says that the purpose of their products is to create desire. So they want people to want it, right? And a lot of the lessons in the Birkin bag itself, which is considered the gold standard for fashion luxury, is the type of stuff that you'll see in what we've discussed in the Crypto Punks, a Tiffany collaboration. It's like these things have a long history, right? Birkin and Hermes have been around. Hermes has been around since 1837. So this is actually interesting regarding the Crypto Punks. In the Ethereum world, Crypto Punks is that, right? It's like the equivalent. Would you? We talked about this before, but
Are you saying that Crypto Punks are like the Birkin bag of Web3?
no, they're
Is that
the Hermes brand. Like
Clip it,
Clip
boys.
it, Mark Clip. There we go. Added it. There we go.
No, it's the Hermes.
Yeah, it's true.
Well, we always joke about how Ethereum is speed running the finance industry, but let's say that every year since Ethereum's been around, we just call it like dog years, like 20 years. Like Crypto Punks are like the Hermes of that society and universe. I mean, happy to hear some pushback on that, unless you guys agree.
I'm not pushing back.
Yeah, in the
That's
short
for me.
history, here we go. In the short time we have, and I guess that comes back to what I was asking earlier, which is if what drives luxury fashion, luxury brands is aspiration, that desire that you mentioned, and long history, the Lindy effect of that. And what drives the new stuff, I think there is always going to be that is always going to be the case. It's like a human trait to want something that is rare and whatever. At the same time, the segment of population are kind of normally more early adopters versus like, older people, laggards equivalent, right?
Well,
so there's gone.
No, I'd say, Bilal, something to keep an eye out for is to your question of like, what about the newer stuff? How do they kind of gain traction and kind of?
Yeah, I mean, like bored apes. If you think of if we were placing what is a bored ape, I mean, maybe bored ape is the off-white the equivalent. The way we described it, of like, okay, they haven't been around for 300 years, but they were the hot shit for the last year or whatever. And the question is, will they have the staying power, and is there a equivalent of a Virgil that actually keeps it going? Because something we've talked about on the pod a bunch, obviously, is like what actually gave any of these things value in the first place in NFT world anyway. Was it primarily just number go up and the fact that you think you're going to be able to sell it for more to someone in the future? Or is it you really love this thing and it signals certain things the way that luxury fashion does? I think they can all be criticized, right? Like luxury, we've talked a lot about the good parts of luxury, but the cynical side is, it's really terrible and it makes people want stuff they don't. Waste of money. They charge $500 for a t-shirt versus $20 from Uniqlo. Is it that much better proportionately, right? And like, obviously it's not literally that X better quality, but you're also getting all the other things, which is the signaling, the fact you feel like a boss, etc.
Wow.
Go on.
It's to your point. It's like, let me ask you this question. So,
etc.
One of the things that makes the Birkin so special, and a lot of luxury items special, is that they have a founding story, right? They have like a special founding story. So the Birkin bag founding story is that the CEO of Hermes was on a flight in the early 80s. He's flying from Paris to London when actress Jane Birkin, who I don't know if everybody knows Jane Birkin, but do some Google image searches. Jane Birkin was on the plane and complaining that she didn't have a bag that could carry all her stuff. And so the CEO for Hermes is like, wait a second, I have an idea. And then that's the founding story, right? Whether or not that is the truth. So the question then becomes to Bilal's question. Okay, will Bored Ape have lasting power? How do we feel about Bored Ape's founding story? How do we feel about it in the narrative of 2021? It definitely was the thing, right? It was like that crazy,
that's the thing.
crazy
I think the story will only be like 5, 10, 20 years from now to look back. If, let's say, NFTs were a much bigger part of society the way lots of people think it might be, and 2020 or whenever, what was it, 2020? I can't even keep up with the date. 2021 was the year that it popped off. 2021.
No, 2021.
That was the NFT craze.
March,
the first big year NFTs popped off.
Yeah.
Will it be the historical thing where we're telling those equivalent stories? It might not be the same founding story of the people who designed the art and stuff like that, but that what it signified, the same way a punk is not, you're not buying it because it's the best art in the world, you're buying it because it was the original and it had a story in its own way, right? I mean, I don't mean to judge the artwork, but you know what I mean. So and I'd say actually Bored Apes actually look pretty cool, right? Like they actually do have some creative flair or whatever, but again, most of the value was because they became the hot thing. People were buying them because they thought they were going to go up in price. I'm not saying that's the only reason, but that is clearly a big part of it. So if there is this thing in the future, then the story is kind of being written as we speak. And were they the first ones to create a movie and become the decentralized Disney like we spoke about? And you were there when you bought one, or you had the power to buy one 10 years from now and display it on your wall or whatever, and have the Tiffany, chain on you, whatever it might be. So I think it's quite hard to obviously judge, something that's been around for a few years versus a 200-year brand. But I like the exercise.
800-year-old champagne.
Boys.
Yeah. Go on, Jack.
Let me drop a little stat here. This is not investment advice, but as you were talking, Bilal, it's like, how many Birkin bags are in circulation? What's your boys' guess?
I think it's single-digit thousands or something crazy. Is it crazy
30,000?
small?
According to an analyst quoted by the New York Times, in 2019, there are more than 1 million Birkin bags on the market.
That's crazy.
So
that's mad. All
they
right.
made us
I
think
said
it's a
that
lot
just
more
because
scary.
the way you asked the question.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Well, actually, so
How many crypto punks are
How many
there?
of those on
Tron?
Canal Street, though? Let's be
Wow.
honest.
wait, actually, Jack. So Jack's just pumped. Yeah, not investment advice. Don't go buy the pendant.
Okay, there we go. There
Right
was
here.
the punchline.
Okay, hold on. Let me. Okay, Jack just dragging the Birkin bag through the mud here. So let me throw two things to throw out there. All right, I'm gonna say two more things about how Birkin. Three things. Number one, the first one being why Birkin bag is so valuable. The quality is super high. Jack talked about this. So, although I did not realize the number that Jack put out, because there are only 200. The only 200 people a year are making Birkin bags. They each take 20 to 25 hours to make. But apparently over 30 years, there's been a million of them. So that's one thing, right? These Birkin bags do take
You can't
Well, I
just
don't know
buy
if that's
one.
true.
You can't just buy one. I thought you have to get an appointment.
this is
and
what
do
I
this.
mean.
There's like a long
Yeah.
waiting list.
Hold on, but Bilal, this is what I'm going to say. To add to the, if we look at ahead of some of the stuff you mentioned, if they have the lasting power, the Hermes thing, like you said, is insane. You can't just walk into an Hermes store and buy a Birkin bag. They tell you when you can buy it. They completely flip the model on its head. And the only way you are allowed to quote unquote buy a Birkin bag, you have to have a relationship with the store staff and the stores themselves. And I mean, how do you start a relationship? You got to start
You're not buying on eBay.
Yeah, exactly. And you got to start buying the stuff we talked about. Like my wife's been asking, hey, can we get an Hermes scarf? Like, can we get an Hermes? She wants to get the snowball rolling for when that Birkin bag day comes. But is there any of that we see where the buying model is completely flipped? Like there's Okay, one thing is scarcity. You can't actually get something. Then there is we're making you wait for us to ask you to do it. Are we seeing any of that in the CryptoPunk Bored Ape world, which could signal some lasting power?
I mean, there's like, the concept of a whitelist.
Yeah.
You heard about this?
Well, can you explain?
So it's like you're gonna, so the idea is that you would pre-select addresses that you're gonna allow to mint the thing. You might even create like a window, like a separate time where that can happen. So basic like attempt to manipulate network effects, right? You get the people that have a voice and like the people whose wallets are being watched by 50 different apps, and then once that signal pops that like, influencer X just minted this project, then everybody rushes to the thing. But I think what's interesting is like now we are seeing the story thesis become more prevalent. The brands or the projects, the artists, the things that have an interesting founding story, to your point, Trung, whether that was through like just being in the right place at the right time or having like done something for the first time. I think those things are all being scrutinized more than just like, oh, there's so much attention on this thing that there's the likelihood that you're going to be able to make a profitable flip of an asset just based on the pure fact there's more people coming to this platform every month is no longer the case, right? It is much more to do with what does a brand stand for, who's running it, how well are they telling the story, how good is the product, all of that stuff. And I would much rather make a bet on like the significance of, like the historical and cultural significance of an asset than, you know, here's 5 anonymous people and they're going to execute an incredible video game in the hardest possible market to crack in the world. But you know, people are going to do it. That's not saying that they're not going to. That's not going to happen. It's just that I don't have the conviction to bet on any small group of people that are doing that.
Yeah, fair. What I think, Jack, you kind of brought up something there, which is like when you were saying that, it made me think of, you said the word asset, and if you think of like a lot of these luxury goods, a lot of people obviously use the bag and they wear the fancy watch or whatever, but if you speak to a lot of people, I mean, you might even have a fancy watch, both of you guys, and when you buy the watch, you're in your head, you're like, yeah, I mean, it's a good investment, you know, I'm gonna be able to sell this in the future if I need to. You're not gonna lose money. That's what they always say, right? And I think that's the kind of mental gymnastics you end up having to do to convince yourself to buy something like that. And I'm curious, like, how much of that is going to be similar in this world, right? And I think, like,
well,
the
boys,
more we...
if you think
Yeah, go on.
No, sorry, Bilal, you finish.
No, go. I think I was finished.
I was going to say, like, the real NFT maximalists are taking the view that objects and, like, art and, like, assigning ownership to a unique thing is a harder form of currency than a database where the number can change on any given day, you know?
Yeah.
Like the ability to dilute a currency, even as an artist, even as Hermes, if you think about that in the context of NFTs, every bag they make is diluting their currency, every single one. So it's like,
yeah, that's a good way
it's
to put
monetary
it.
Policy. The way you think about it is like, is there enough demand for this thing where like increasing the supply by 3,000 isn't going to like have a impact on the value of this social currency? And that is like the same consideration that Jerome Powell has to make when he's like, let's bang another, you know, $1 trillion into whatever market. Yeah.
Somebody make a meme of somebody printing out Birkin bags.
Yeah. So I think that like,
out here.
well, I think that's why NFTs got popular so fast too, is because people really can grasp that idea better than they can like staring at spreadsheets and charts and like issuance and reading white papers. It's like, no, there's 10,000 of these. If there's more than 10,000 people want them, the price goes up. That's it.
Not investment advice. Jesus Christ. I think we got bull NFT.
Sorry.
Bull,
Let me make an edit to that. More than 10,000 people that can afford to buy them. They're willing to buy them.
That's true.
Just single-handedly saved the Ethereum. Well, actually, I'm going to give us credit. Bilal, you opened with Michael Saylor, Vitalik beef. Go look when our podcast came out and go look at the Ethereum price chart. Somebody clip that for us.
The Saylor episode was the bottom of the market, man.
Not investment advice.
Here's me hoping.
I got a boogie. If you guys want to keep recording, you definitely should. I
think we're
gotta
good.
take off,
Jack, is there anything else?
I think we nailed it, boys.
We're here an hour.
I think we nailed it.
Perfect.
No, I think that it's perfect. It's perfect. We'll pick it up next week. We'll do the Saylor Vitalik.
We'll do a full breakdown because I'm sure we need more time for it to marinate because you know
it's still
what's
going
his name
on.
got involved. Super Max Kaiser.
Max Kaiser
saying, tweeting out Vitalik is DAE date. I'm like, yo, relax, man. Keep my name out your mouth. I don't want to be involved in this. But let's do that next week.
Yeah.
I think this was
a good chat. Good chat, boys. And if you made it all the way here, let us know what you think of this one. Thanks again for being here. We appreciate you, and we'll see you next week on the next episode of Not Investment Advice.